It's time for the Wednesday Word of the Week, and this week we're going to return to a previous Word of the Week and look at it specifically in the way that the Apostle Paul uses it in Romans chapter 4. And our Word of the Week is logizomai. Logizomai means I count, I reckon, or I credit. And in Romans chapter 4, there's an extensive description of the life of Abraham and how Abraham's faith, trusting in God to do for him what he couldn't do for himself, was counted, reckoned, or credited to Abraham as righteousness. So not his conduct, not his behavior, not the pattern of his living, not his synagogue attendance, but his reliance on God to do for him what he could not do for himself was credited to him as righteousness. That brings us to our word of the week in Romans chapter 4, verse 22 from the ESV. This is why faith was counted to him as righteousness. And counted here is elogiste. This is an aorist, passive, indicative, third person singular. It was counted or credited. So Paul, a trained rabbi, quotes Genesis chapter 15, verse 16. So he quotes Torah to establish this premise: righteousness via credit. So Abraham believed God, he trusted God, he had faith in God, and God credited Abraham with righteousness. So his account, when the ledger is looked at, it says, Abraham is righteous. Why is he righteous? Because of his reliance, faith, trust in God. By appealing to the Torah, Paul tells his audience that this is not his idea. This is an idea that goes all the way back to the ultimate patriarch, to Abraham, to what some would consider the original Jew. And here he is, credited with righteousness. Righteousness by faith rather than righteousness through his works and deeds. And that is an important message from Paul's perspective to his audience. Abraham's righteousness is something that was credited to him, was counted on the ledger for him, was reckoned, was thought of, was considered as something that belonged to him because of his faith in God. Let's look at what Paul wrote in verses 23 and 24. But the words "it was counted," elogiste, just like the previous verse, to him, were not written for his sake alone, but for ours also. It will be counted, logizesthai, to us who believe in him who raised from the dead Jesus our Lord. So he says this concept of being credited with righteousness is not just about Abraham. Faith in the risen Jesus shall be counted, reckoned, or credited as righteousness to or for us. So again, future tense, shall be credited. So finally, Paul then makes a profound statement in verse 25. Who was delivered up for our trespasses and raised for our justification. So let's break this down to two parts in Koine. Hos paradothe dia ta paraptomata hemon. So hos is who or whom. Paradothe was handed over. This is passive, aorist passive, third person singular of paradidomi. So didomi is I give, and para is along or over here. So paradidomi, paradothe, he was given over. So when Judas betrays Jesus, if you go and read the accounts of the betrayal, Jesus is handed over by Judas to the soldiers and officials that came in the garden and took Jesus away for the trial. He was handed over. Here, Paul interprets that event and says Jesus was handed over because of our trespasses. Notice he says haemon, the trespasses haemon of us. Not humon of you, plural, but haemon of us, our trespasses. Paul includes himself in the people for whom the trespasses of Jesus was handed over. Jesus was handed over, betrayed for the trespasses of us, our trespasses. What is a trespass? A trespass is crossing over a line and being somewhere that you know you don't belong. It's a conscious act of being someplace out of bounds where you don't belong. So what? Paul interprets the betrayal of Jesus as not being for the trespasses of Jesus, regardless of what Judas's intentions and motives were. He interprets it as being handed over because of our trespasses. Again, credited, like Jesus is being credited with the wrongdoings of us and not of himself. Let's look at the second half. Kai egerthe dia tein dikaiosin haemon. So he was handed over for our trespasses, and he was raised for our justification. So in order that we might be acquitted of our guilt, the one who wasn't guilty, who was perfectly innocent, was handed over for our trespasses. And then when he was raised, it enables the acquittal, the justification legally of us for whom the trespasses were credited to him. The justification takes place, and we can be acquitted of our actual guilt. We can be credited with righteousness, righteous although proven guilty, innocent although proven guilty, is credited to us, logizomai, like he said in the prior verse, logizesthai, it shall be credited to us. And that's what Paul says happened here. So we can be counted, credited, or reckoned as righteous. This is astonishing because his interpretation is just like Abraham was credited as righteous, not because of his deeds, because in his deeds he tried to fulfill God's promises by using Hagar as a sexual surrogate and producing the child of promise through an act of procreation. Just like that didn't make him righteous, faith in God made him righteous. Here, Paul says, Jesus was handed over for our trespasses and was raised from the dead for our justification, so that despite our record of trespass, despite our provable guilt, we would be credited, reckoned, and considered as righteous because we trusted in the one who could do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. No matter what I do today, I can't undo what I did yesterday. I can't offset guilt with good behavior today. That's not how it works. But because an innocent was handed over for my trespasses, I can be credited with his righteousness and his resurrection as a justifying act. He died and paid the penalty, rose again, so that I could be credited, logizomai, credited with righteousness that I don't possess, that none of us possess. That's what makes it so incredible, this concept that Paul says, it's not my idea, I took it from Torah. It applied to the ultimate patriarch, Abraham. It was credited to him because he trusted in God. And we who trust in the God that raised Jesus from the dead, who had been given over, handed over because of our trespasses, and raised for our justification. He can take our record and stamp it, credited, counted, reckoned righteousness. What an amazing word. What an amazing concept. What an amazing writer that Paul was. Thanks for watching today for our word of the week, logizomai, counted, credited, reckoned, and specifically in Romans chapter 4, for our righteousness. Great stuff. See you next time. Karis Kaireni Humin, grace and peace to you.